We are back on Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast of PatsFans.com. I'm Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Steve Balistrieri in the secret square and Derek Havens in the top right square. I'm in the left-hand square where I probably deserve to be. In this episode, we're going to ask the question because it has dominated the media, social media, I don't know for what, 6 months, guys? Belichick versus Brady. I think it's complete and utter BS. I'm going to make my argument. Others think it's extremely relevant. We're going to talk about that. But guys, before we do anything else, we have to talk about Tom Brady winning his 7th Super Bowl ring and the Super Bowl in general. I got to be honest with you. I was not happy that Brady got to the Super Bowl, but he got there. And I was happy that he won because I did not want the Chiefs to go back-to-back. And I think the Chiefs showed us that they're not ready to be a dynasty yet. We'll just leave it at that because the Bucs were good, the Chiefs were bad. Derek, give me your thoughts on the Super Bowl.
Well, I thought that the Chiefs just didn't look like they were, up for the game. The Bucs had a great game plan. I thought that offensively they were very efficient. Brady. It's funny. We're hoping to talk with a guest later that has written a lot about Patriots history. And if you want to roll back into your favorite era, which is the early 2000s, I thought that Brady.
Oh, I'll be in my glory, by the way.
Yeah, I thought that Brady, kind of looked like in this game like he did in 03, 04, where it was a lot of play action, a lot of efficiency. I think he was like 16 to 20 at the half. And look, there were a lot of contributors on that side. And defensively, Todd Bowles' scheme was really impressive. The Chiefs just didn't look comfortable. They didn't make adjustments. Not enough, myself included, but not enough by a lot of people was made with all the Chiefs' offensive line issues, the situation with Andy Reid's son, who's a member of the staff, or I guess former member of the staff there.
Yep.
And I just thought that the Bucs looked like they were ready for prime time, and the Chiefs weren't. And Mahomes actually looked relatively mortal. I don't think he played a bad game. I just think that there were a lot of miscues on both sides. Was he great? No, but he was under duress. And it's funny you talk about Brady in 03, 04. With his performance, I thought the Chiefs kind of reminded me a little bit of the 07 Super Bowl with the Patriots, where you kind of thought throughout the game, even though Tampa Bay's lead kept crawling and crawling forward, I was just waiting for them to kind of get up in gear and do something. And the defensive line and front seven for Tampa Bay just wasn't letting that happen. And I think, I believe it was Rich Eisen who I heard say that NFL Network, or I don't know if it was ESPN Stats and Information, tweeted out that Mahomes ran for like 497 yards scrambling around, and he just was under duress all night long. And I just thought the Bucs were really, really impressive in the game, and they made the plays they needed to make. And overall, I thought the game was pretty boring, but I was happy to see Brady win. His 7th. I definitely didn't want the Chiefs to win. I'm not sure if I'd go as far as what you would say, Russ, where I don't know if the Chiefs are ready to be a dynasty. I just think it's one of those things. It's kind of a little cold water where you're like, it's not as easy as just rolling out of bed and getting there. They certainly just weren't up for the moment, and they didn't execute when they needed to.
Well, put it to you this way, Derek, and then I want to get Steve's take on this as well. I think that they are believing their own hype, honestly, because you need to earn it. You need to win it. And I think that they believe that they could just win the game without really giving it everything that they needed to give. And I think the Bucs deserve all the credit in the world. Sure. I've heard all the excuse making, Derek, about how the Chiefs played badly, but as we say with the Patriots, it takes two to tango. The Bucs made the Chiefs look bad, and I'm sick of the excuses because I've heard all the excuses. The officials. If you want to go there, if that makes you feel better, that's fine. The Kansas City Chiefs got their asses kicked there.
The thing about the officials that bothers me is it's just never consistent. In the game, it was consistent, but with the rest of the playoffs, it wasn't consistent. But let's be honest, if you're blaming the officials in this game, you just weren't watching. The officials, there were some bad calls on both sides. I thought that more calls favored Tampa Bay, but that didn't affect the outcome of the game. What affected the outcome of the game was Tampa Bay's front seven versus the Chiefs' offensive line. It started up front, and that was really just the storyline there. And I think that blame goes. I think that a lot of credit goes to Tampa Bay. I do think they won the game. I do think they made the plays, but I do think for Kansas City there were a lot of mistakes, a lot of penalties, a lot of drop passes, bad decisions, poor coaching, poor game plan, poor execution all the way around.
Okay, Steve, I want to go to you. I want to get your take, and I want to share this from our friend Damian Sharkey. Steve looks like Switzerland between these two, and that's probably pretty accurate. But
we got to keep this, arrangement going for the future.
I know. I kind of like it this way. But Steve, I want to get your thoughts on what I'm about to share, because I've heard this. The excuses given to the Kansas City Chiefs not having offensive linemen, okay? What would we be saying here? Would we be pointing at that here? Would we be making excuses? Exactly. So I don't want to hear about the fact that they didn't have offensive linemen in this game. They were missing their starting offensive tackles. I'm calling BS on all that. You have the players that you have. I stop the excuses. The Kansas City Chiefs got their asses kicked, Steve. Your thoughts?
Well, and I think, Derek hit on it right at the beginning. I think the situation that unfolded with Britt Reed affected Andy more than people want to let on. Because, for the past couple of years, everyone's been raving about Andy Reid's play calling and, all of those issues that he used to have with, with the time clock and some of his personnel decisions. Those have kind of been on the back burner. They all came home to roost. I thought that he never made adjustments. They were just going to go out and do what they were going to do.
That's right.
And they weren't doing it, and he never adjusted. I was expecting, they got the ball first in the second half. I was expecting them to come out. And honestly, I thought they were going to blow right down the field and score a touchdown, and then we'd have a Super Bowl again, right? They went down. They kind of clawed and scratched. Then they only got a field goal. And I was thinking to myself, if that's all they could come up with at halftime, they're going to be in trouble, because on the other side, I thought Tampa Bay's offense really had the Chiefs' defense number in this game. And, you go back to that first game, you remember the Chiefs blew out to a huge lead early in that game.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill had video game numbers, in that first quarter, first half.
Yeah, he had 200 yards in the first half. And what happened was it took the Bucs completely out of their running game. You remember Leonard Fournette only had 3 carries in that entire game in the first time. But even still, Tampa Bay kind of clawed and scratched their way in. That game ended up being pretty close. So Tampa got it figured out. The Chiefs never did. But the other thing, I had to laugh, because every time Mahomes was scrambling for his life and everyone was oohing and ahhing about what a tremendous play, they were all incomplete. He didn't complete any of those passes.
Yeah, but a lot to me, I know I agree with your larger point, but to be fair, those were a lot of drop passes too. I mean, the guys, they were hitting them in the face mask.
And again, Tampa had something to do with that. But I mean, it was like, okay, yeah, how many times are you going to ooh and ah about an incomplete pass? I mean, come on.
And I thought the biggest.
And again, I'm just going to go back to flip the script. That was on Tom Brady. Would we have been hearing that stuff?
Exactly,
I think
Steve.
not. And I don't want to hear about Mahomes' toe, because, he was limping after every play, but he was sure scrambling around really, really good while the play was going on. So was it painful? I'm sure it was, because he's had surgery on it since. But did it affect him to the point where it affected his game? No.
And I think one of the biggest things that I saw from Daniel Jeremiah, I think the following day on Monday after this game, that I think illustrates a big picture of this game. But when you talk about Andy Reid not adjusting, and, I don't know, I forget if it was Russ or Steve who just said this a minute ago, you're talking about, the tackles being out. It's a big deal. But as Russ said, you got to have to make adjustments. You got to roll with it, right?
Exactly.
Daniel Jeremiah tweeted this on the 7th. So I guess, 5 days ago. Kansas City used 5-man protection on 92% of dropbacks. 48 of 52 dropbacks, they only used 5 guys. Do you think that if it was Belichick or any other competent coach, because I think Andy Reid's a good coach for the most part. Okay, he is a good coach, not for the most part. He's a good coach, but when you're talking about you have 2 tackles, you're starting tackles out, and you have 3 guys playing different positions, or a third guy moving positions because of it, and you leave 5-man protection when you have your quarterback drop back 52 times, 92% of the times. Like what at what point are you going to acknowledge that your franchise quarterback, the star of the league, Patrick Mahomes, is running for his life, and that there were just nothing to be made? Andy Reid is not getting enough blame for this game. I know that a lot of people like him, so they're kind of protecting him because he's dealing with a tremendous tragic situation involving his son, and I'm praying for the family that has and all of that, but I mean the family that was hurt. I don't mean Andy Reid's son. I mean,
I know what you mean.
But that coverage for the media too really pissed me off throughout the week, but that's a side story. But I think Andy Reid has skated on this a lot, and a lot of the game afterwards is, Kansas City couldn't do this, and it was not enough credit given to that Bucs defense, in my opinion, because they were flying. And man, I'll tell you, Devin White is something special. He is a fun player to watch for that Tampa Bay defense. It's just tremendous.
And Tampa Bay came. Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the other thing was Tampa didn't blitz much.
No,
they were coming with 4 guys most of the game. Only a couple of times they blitzed 5. So if you're the Chiefs, offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy, who everyone's been fawning over for the past 2 years, why aren't you keeping your backs in to chip or to block? Because your quarterback's running for his life, and it's not like they're dialing it up and they're coming from all different sides. They're rushing 4 guys on every play.
Yep.
And your quarterback's running for his life, but yet you're still sending the house out on every play. Leave the guy in and help your quarterback out. You could complain all about the officials that you want. The decisions in coaching, to me, were huge in this game.
And they didn't start running the ball till later in the game. And I know Tampa Bay's run defense is one of the best in the league, if not the best in the league. I think they allowed less than 3 yards a carry throughout the season. But when you're
you need to be running more, Derek.
You have to, even if you're only getting 3 yards a clip,
doesn't matter. You need to be doing
the defense honest. And offensive linemen, any offensive lineman you'll ever
look at the Brandon Derek
will always tell you they'd rather be run blocking when they're attacking than in pass pro when they're on their heels. Especially when you're talking about that Tampa Bay front seven, how athletic, how strong they are, how versatile they can be. You have to try to run after the ball, and that would help. That would help protect your backup offensive linemen who are in, your quarterback who's limping on the field, and just help mix things up and keep things honest. And it boils down to this for me: the Chiefs were just not ready. Players weren't ready. Coaches didn't have a good game plan. The Bucs were ready for it. And really, they've been building and building to this point. There was a lot of settling that took throughout the season, but they finally kind of clicked in and hey, they got the win. So again, a lot of credit to them.
Yeah, I just thought Kansas City looked like they were acting a little entitled, and they didn't like it when they were getting smashed in the mouth.
That's what I was trying to say before. Entitled is a good word.
They were acting entitled because, when they were getting smashed in the mouth, they weren't liking it, and they were chirping a lot in this game. And I know Derek loves Mr. Tyrann Mathieu, but hey, sometimes it's best not to pull Superman's cape. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Yeah, and it really, honestly, that situation, I'd like to touch on that real quick.
Go ahead.
It really pissed me off after the game when he tweets out saying that, I'm not going to repeat what Brady said, but it wasn't great, or whatever. I'm obviously
he tried to hint around, and Michael Irvin was the one who called him out on that.
Yeah, and
he tried to hint around that it was something racial.
Yeah,
and then when he found out that Brady was wired for the game, he dropped that. He deleted that tweet really quick.
Like that's a pretty. People know what he was insinuating by the way he phrased it. Okay, and I don't have the screenshot of the tweet or whatever that was deleted, but and I like Tyrann Mathieu. I think he's a very good player. But to say something like that afterwards, especially in these charged times where there's a lot of people divided on a lot of different issues, and that's just a pretty lowball thing to say about somebody. I mean, just really going after just their integrity and everything. I just thought that was Bush League, and I'm glad that Michael Irvin heard the audio. I know that some other people, Pro Football Talk, have talked about it, and I think some of it's going to be aired at some point on Showtime, and I'm glad that it will. You knew that it was just chirping between two guys on both sides, and what happens when Brady people have done that to him over the years, he goes after him. It's like he did that with Antonio Brown in this touchdown, in the touchdown in this Bucs game. He was going after him, and then Brady wanted to let him know, I'm coming after you, and then he just did it. And I thought that was great. It was vintage Tom, but to me, the story afterwards of insinuating that it was something racial and then deleting it just came off as just so cowardly and just such bush league. Sorry, that just really fucking. Oh, didn't mean to pass. That really just pissed me off.
Excuse me.
I was going to say the exact same thing. So
you're not going to hear the end of that from Miguel.
I know. I'll put $1 in the jar. All right.
Okay.
All right, take a laugh.
All right. Good stuff, guys. And listen, I'm glad that we talked about the Super Bowl. But another thing, leading up to the Super Bowl and it's been going on for 6 months. And we do hope to have a special guest. I do want to mention that in just a bit. I do want to touch on this. And again, I made it the title. Do you think Belichick versus Brady is relevant? And I'm going to get us going, guys, because you guys are other places now. You don't get to see it or hear it as much as obviously I do and read it. And again, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Belichick versus Brady, Brady versus Belichick, however you want to spin it. Steve actually wrote something about this in the Sunday Comment. I'll ask his thoughts on it in just a second as well. But I'm going to put this up because this is how I feel about it. Belichick versus Brady is BS. Okay, I'm going to explain why, and then you guys can share your views on it. The reason why, I find it as a huge insult to all these players and coaches that were part of the double dynasty. Ty Law, Willie McGinnis, Devin McCourty, Malcolm Butler. Doesn't matter when it was. All of them played a significant role. The coaches, Charlie Weiss, Romeo Crennel. Is it fair for these guys to make it just about two people? And it really upsets me that it's been put that way for someone's game to have something to talk about to replace Deflategate talk. Because that's what it is. It has replaced Deflategate talk or Spygate talk. Now it's Belichick versus Brady. We can get 6 months out of this. Let's go. No, let's not go because it's BS. It is complete and utter BS. It's about the team. The three of us, we're coming up on 10 years. And tell me, guys, how many different players played a role in the last 10 years of us doing the show? Because it's not just been about these two. They have had significant roles, extremely significant roles. But to not give any credit to players like I just said, Ty Law, Rodney Harrison, it just irritates the hell out of me. And probably also a reason why Richard Seymour is having a hard time getting into the the Patriots Hall of Fame, into the NFL Hall of Fame. There's a Goldman for you. So I think Belichick versus Brady is BS. Steve, to you, do you agree with me or disagree?
I totally agree with you. And if you read, my Sunday column, it was awful long. Miguel made mention that how long it was, but I felt like it was needed to say. And, again, all we've been hearing, was it Bill? Was it Tom? I think it was a stupid argument to begin with. And Scott Pioli chimed in on this after the fact. Scott Pioli said it's disrespectful to both people. And I totally agree with that. The Patriot way, as they kept saying, is the Patriot way about Tom or is it about Bill? It's the Belichick way. It started with Bill, okay, because he put that, football first team mentality when he took over this team. He started it in 2000. Willie McGinnis, he said something about that. Even though Tom was a rookie that year, Willie McGinnis said, hey, this is when Bill started that. And as Bill says, it's not about collecting talent. It's about building a football team. And the strength of the team, of the individual players, is the strength of the unit and how they function together. And it's not about the players per se. And, I said, but as much as it's Bill, it's his philosophy, it would have never been as successful as it was without Tom Brady. And what Bill says, for a team to accomplish its goal, everybody's got to give up a little bit of their individuality.
Right.
I think that personifies Tom Brady, because Tom Brady, he put his pay second to the team. Right. He always took team-friendly deals.
Yep.
Jeff Howe wrote a piece about different players who played during the dynasty in the years that they didn't win a Super Bowl. And he talked about Sean Springs, who played for many years with the Dallas Cowboys. And in Jeff Howe's piece, Sean Springs lands in Boston during the middle of a blizzard. So they called him. They said, "We got you a room at the hotel at the airport because we can't come out and get you today. Spend the night. We'll be out there in the morning." So he says, now it's March. Season's long over. There's a blizzard. The road's still in the process of being cleared. The Patriots come pick him up. He goes to Foxborough to meet Bill Belichick. And as he's walking through the building, there's one person in the facility. At 7 o'clock in the morning, in the morning after a blizzard, Tom Brady is watching film in March. And that's when Sean Springs said he called his agent and said, "Cancel my other visits. This is the guy I want to play with."
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about. Brady, it might have been, it's Bill Belichick's way. The Patriot way is Belichick's way, but it was personified in no uncertain terms by Tom Brady. So what's my point? It's ridiculous trying to say it's this guy or that guy. They did it together.
Yeah.
And would Belichick have had success with the Patriots already? I'm sure he would have. Would Brady have had success if he played for another team? Absolutely, I'm sure he would have. Would they have had the success?
He is currently.
Would they have had as much as they did together? Absolutely not.
Agreed.
And that's my point. It's and I agree with you that it's BS because they did it together.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go back to those Steelers teams with Terry Bradshaw and Chuck Noll. Would they have been successful? Sure. One without the other. Would they have won 4 Super Bowls without being together? No.
But those teams still needed the steel curtain, Steve.
Yeah,
they still needed Lynn Swann. That's my bigger point.
Right. And the Patriots had the first 3 Super Bowl teams had tremendous defenses.
That's right. That's right. And it's not just about one player.
No, and that's the Patriot way, quote unquote.
Exactly.
Everybody gave up a little. Richard Seymour is paying the price for that now. Because
that's
Richard
my
Seymour,
point in this. Richard Seymour is really paying the price.
Yeah, he's not a fantasy football star.
Right.
He doesn't have a gazillion sacks, but he was one of the most dominant defensive players in his era, and he made the All NFL Decade team from the 2000s for a reason.
And he's struggling to get into the
because he doesn't have fantasy football numbers.
Right, that's a good point. Derek, I want your thoughts on it. Again, how I feel about the first decade of the dynasty, but I love the second decade as well. But my biggest point, and the reason why I want to bring this up, is that it's a talking point because it gives some people something to talk about. And I understand if fans want to talk about it, they want to have a conversation about it. But for me, it goes beyond that because it's become this thing that has taken like a conversation between me and you. Hey, who's more responsible, to a huger talking point that the media has driven through our skulls. So I think it's BS because I think the Patriots double dynasty is about team. And as Steve said, one of the most important players of the double dynasty bought in, and everyone else bought in to a team concept. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with that. Talk about beating a dead horse to this subject. Geez, the horse is long gone by this point. And I understand the conversation and look, even right now with Brady just winning in Tampa Bay, it's like, oh, well, Brady's up on Belichick now. Well, look, that whole argument is ridiculous too, because, if Bill could just leave and just go to any team and just replace any head coach and pick whatever roster he felt was great, yeah, I'm sure he could have some success there too. But it's much harder for him, with where you're rebuilding a team and trying to do things where, Brady, who was able to leave and he found a situation that he deemed was a great fit with a loaded roster. It can be a snap of a finger for a player. It can't be that way for a coach. But I agree with Steve. I think that ultimately, Danny Amendola's comments, he sounded like someone who was just really butthurt about his past situation. And that's honestly a conversation for a longer day. And I understand why Danny felt some of the reasons that he did, because ultimately he did take several pay cuts to stay with the team, because he said it himself. He wanted to play with Brady. He wanted to play with Edelman. And, so that's why he did that. But he thought he was going to be kind of kept around, and he was upset that he wasn't. And I understand that to a point. I thought that Darius Butler's comments, and you can check his timeline on Twitter, I thought he did a good job of kind of breaking things down. And Russ, to your point, I think that this argument is disrespectful to all the players that have been brought in by Belichick, the GM, and obviously Brady's gravitational pull. That star quarterback is going to have that gravitational pull. Obviously, that's going to be a factor too. But there were a lot of great players who made a lot of great plays in this run. And the easy answer is what you guys have already said. They both would have had success without each other, but they wouldn't have had as much as they did together. And Brady was Belichick's ultimate disciple. And that's why it worked as long as it did. And a lot of that credit I give, honestly, I give more credit to Brady ultimately, because I do feel like he had to probably take a lot of stuff behind the scenes from Bill, because but he believed in it because they were winning and everything like that. But Brady's a worker, and there's no doubt of his commitment to the craft and to the sport. So I just look at it and say, yeah, I can understand how it could be a fun talk radio, thing for a couple of days. I can't believe it's lasted as long as it has. But,
a life of its own.
In a big media market like Boston, and when you're talking about something as polarizing as what the Patriots have done over the last 20 years with the national media, I guess I shouldn't be shocked. But yeah, I do think it's a BS argument. Overall, I couldn't agree more.
Wow, Derek and I agree. That makes me feel very good. Okay,
and coming up, I'm not Switzerland now. See, I'm not Switzerland here in the middle.
Okay, good stuff, guys. Well, coming up next, we're going to bring on a special guest and hear what he has to say about the 2 books he has written. Okay, guys, I'm going to bring on our special guest. His name's Bob Hildberg. He's written 2 very good books on the New England Patriots, and hopefully we'll have a good connection with Bob. Bob, welcome to Patriots 4th and 2. Can you hear us?
Nope.
Okay.
Yes, good afternoon, Russ and Derek.
Hey, Bob, how are you?
Okay.
Last night, Russ, Bob and I were on a conference call with a bunch of people that we had a Blogapalooza reunion last night. We got to talk with a bunch of the old guys. It was a blast last night. I had a really good time.
Okay. Bob, thank you so much for joining us tonight or today on Patriots 4th and 2. And we're talking about, and again, we were just discussing Belichick versus Brady, and it's been a huge talking point here in Boston for a very long period of time. I made my thoughts fairly crystal clear on it. You're a historian. What are your thoughts about all the talk focused on these 2 men and not enough being put on all the other players, all the other coaches? And as Steve and I were reiterating, I think it's also a reason why Richard Seymour is having a hard time getting the Pro Football Hall of Fame, because so much has been put on 2 people, which, again, are very important to the double dynasty, but there are so many others that are involved in it. That's why I think Belichick versus Brady is complete BS. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you need 50s to win. Certainly using elite positions to make the plays. Belichick can't intercept the pass or throw it or catch it. But it takes a team effort. And, this whole Seymour thing about getting into the Hall of Fame, he had to adjust a lot of his play. Same thing with Wilfork and different things to adapt to the defense that Belichick wanted to run. and you maybe had to give up some stats to take on two blockers, to make someone else make the play or else rush the quarterback or tackle or whatever. So there is a combination. You need someone like a Rodney Harrison or a Teddy Bruschi or Lawyer Malloy, that whole do your job mantra that was set up in '96, that everyone and then Willie McGinnis, his nickname at one time was the regulator, making sure that everyone was on the same page. Yep. But you had to buy into the concept that Belichick knew what he was doing.
Okay. Very good there, Bob. And tell us a little bit about your latest book. And, I'm just curious your thoughts on everything. Again, what's great about you is that you really write about Patriots history. So talk about your latest book and also your first book as well.
Well, I'm just a fan. And, one of the things that started the whole process of Total Patriots, the book that came out 11 years ago, is that I want to really know the history, and I wanted to know the uniform number of every player, just for a particular reason. And then I got a media guide, and I had a whole bunch of NAs next to their number. And I called Gil Santos, who I knew because I lived in Rainham, and he was a neighbor of ours. And he said, go to the sports museum and talk to Richard Johnson. And I started doing some research. And eventually I got a hold of the Patriots, and Stacey James said, we move on. We don't really care too much about the past. We live for the next week. And, we're not the 60s that had 3 games that they played for us, and we don't know what their uniform numbers, and we really don't care. But I said, well, I just thought that with that thought in mind of coming up with who wore what uniform number when. And now, we found a lot of mistakes editing their media guide over the years, and in the process, I've put together something that now there's an all-time roster display at the Patriots Hall of Fame. Great. With hopefully within the next 6 months, all of that information will be right, and the people can go and check it out.
Well, that's great.
Bob is he's being very self-effacing here, because Bob's name is in the Patriots Hall of Fame now, and he's probably one of the few, if not the only person that wasn't a player or a coach or owner of the Patriots whose name is now in the Patriots Hall of Fame. So Bob needs to take a big bow for that one.
It was a labor. I mean, the second book, Russ, was really working on this display. I mean, I was telling Steve and some of the guys from the Blogapalooza last night with Joe Gill and all those guys that I had intention of really updating the book. There was so much that was involved with doing the first book. We're talking 2,000 hours of research, probably 20 hours a week for, 20 years of nights and weekends and spending days in the Patriots and reviewing every game and looking up all the microfilm and looking up the longest, the furthest, the most, the blocked, 2-point conversions, all that stuff. Wow. I said, all right, it's in Total Patriots. I'm done. I don't need. And then when they contacted me and said they wanted to do an interactive display, I said, here we go again. And I had to put a couple thousand hours of research and update the book. And since I was doing it for them and getting paid to do it, I said, well, I'll put another book out. So we found a few mistakes in Total Patriots, a few minor things that we corrected by doing even more in-depth research, interviewing some players, but chance to, probably meet and talk to 200 players. And for 13 years, I was actually in the Patriots press room, home game. So, I mean, the experiences that I've had, just having, the want to and the passion to really go back to day one of 1960 and find players that people didn't even know even existed. I found a guy, Leroy Phelps, who played games in 1960. The Patriots didn't have any idea 2 years ago. It's not on Football Reference. It's not on NFL, but I found a game report, and he was in 2 games. Took 50 years or whatever to find, and he was in 2 games, and We still don't know his date of birth, but well, he played in 2 games back in 1960. Wow. So digging some of that kind of stuff up has been fun.
Okay, excellent. Bob, I just want to ask you this because, again, this is something Steve and I have talked about, and Derek's younger, so he will not be able to really reference this time period. But I'm curious your view when you look at all the Patriots teams and you've chronicled everything. Where does 1976 fit into all this?
Well, I look at a game, when I'm watching a game, I'm looking at how intelligent and how efficient the team plays. And you look at Brady, he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. We don't turn the ball over. Turnover ratio is a big decision.
Yep.
And 76 was probably we probably had the best athletes and the most athletic team. But in that game against the Raiders, they made a lot of mental mistakes.
Okay.
I mean, Prentice McRae getting a 50-yard field goal from kicking the ball after it was placed down, and Sam Cunningham running out of bounds before the first down. Pete Brock and Steve Grogan missing up the sequence of what call it was on 3. They tried to out Francis throwing a pass. What are you getting intercepted? All of those plays came back to haunt them. They would have won the championship in question, even though I talked to Mike Haynes. He says he got hurt in that Brooklyn game, and he might not have played the rest of the other 2 games. But Willie Germany was our backup, but we've been picked and the whole thing. But 76 was loaded. We just weren't that prepared mentally to play that game.
That's very interesting. And I have fond memories of 1976. I was 10 years old, and that's a team that I will never forget. And that's when I learned about disappointment, Bob. Honestly, I learned about the agony of defeat. The old Wide World of Sports commercial, the opening. That's when I learned it for myself with the Patriots. And it never went away until the dynasty was born. But I go back to that. Steve, what are your thoughts about all that? Because, again, you probably have as many fond memories as I do.
Well, it's funny. Bob and I, when the first book had come out a few years ago, Bob and I were talking online one night. It was either on Facebook or Twitter, and I was telling him about the first game when I was a kid. I went to my first Patriots game was at Fenway Park against the Raiders, and I remember the Patriots had gotten blown out, and I couldn't remember any of the details. And Bob went through his book, and he sent me the box score from the game. And it was funny because as we were talking, and then he sent that to me, all of those memories came flooding back, and it was so cool because when it's your first game, and it was actually in Fenway. We were sitting in the right field bleachers, and you remember certain things about the game, but you forget, because it was so long ago. But that was really neat. And that's one of the great things about Bob's books is if you've been a fan of the Patriots, you're going to remember stuff that you had forgotten about because with all the games, after a while, some of them blend together. But you go through these, and a lot of it's going to ring true, and you remember some of your earlier memories.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Bob, before I let you go, and I want to really thank you for joining us for 15 minutes to talk about your books. Tell everyone how that they can get your books, because we want them to get these books, and you do a wonderful job, and I can't thank you enough for joining us today. I keep saying that.
Well, people can reach me just directly on Twitter, Bob the Statman.
Yep.
That's one way of communicating with people, Bob the Statman on Twitter. It's on Amazon, the Total Patriots book. You can get it used. It's probably beat up a little bit. But that's on Amazon. And this new book is called Relive Patriots History.
That's
and
great.
Same thing. Just send me a direct message. I could probably get some copies. But they're both on Amazon. Relive Patriots History has been out a few months, and I just noticed that we sold 25 of them in the last 2 days. We're a Patriots fan club in Mexico City.
Well, there you go.
So these fan clubs are buying the books pretty quickly. So
That's
okay,
great.
well, if you're watching or listening to this, get in touch with Bob if you want one of his books. They're excellent. I would highly recommend it. And Bob's just a wonderful guy. And it's funny you guys were talking about the Blogapalooza you brought up. that actually just went right by me, Steve, because again, I feel like I'm right back at that event. It's funny because, and I'll just mention this real quick, because at the event I was at, and there was a panel, and who was on the panel? Nick Stevens. I'll never forget this. Fitzy has gone from the Blogapalooza to being everywhere. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's
Joe Gill was mentioning last night, the first Blogapalooza.
Yep.
Ian Rappaport, was there. Chris Price. I mean, yeah. Some of these guys have now, Albert Breer, they've all moved on to, national gigs at one time or another. Yep. So it was pretty cool. But yeah, it was fun last night going through all that stuff. And
that's good.
Bob, one quick question. I think you mentioned it, but that interactive display at the Patriots Hall of Fame, is that open yet, or is that going to be soon?
It is. It's there. It's on the 3rd floor. We're still adding more stats to it, but every player is there. And now it's just a matter of, because of COVID, the computer programmers are taking their time, because there's not a lot of funding right now for them to do on it. But they have all the stats, and now it's a matter of uploading them. So, they have the pictures there, but, over the next few months, chances are all 1,298 players will have all these unique stats of, if they caught, ran, punted, received, recovered, whatever, all that kind of fun stuff. And it'll have as much detail as we can. So it's there. I was there last week on Super Bowl Sunday before the snow came, and we were, working on it, but it's there, and it's pretty cool. I'll post stuff on my Facebook page, Why We Love Boston, if you can see some stuff there. And follow me, Robert Hilbert Jr. on Facebook. I post some stuff there, but I post stuff on Twitter too. So you'll see some pictures and what it looks like. It's pretty cool.
Okay, good stuff, Bob. Listen, thank you so much for joining us today on Patriots 4th and 2, and hopefully you can come back soon.
Absolutely. Nice to have you. Nice to meet you, Derek.
Nice to meet you, Bob.
Okay.
All right.
Go all right, Bob. Thanks a lot, Bob.
Take care, my friend.
Okay. All right.
I
Guys,
was busting his chops earlier because he didn't mention me on the he tweeted out something about the podcast and he mentioned you guys, and I'm like, what about me?
See, because you're not in the secret square box.
That's it.
You're not in the secret square, Derek.
I don't meet the age requirement.
That's the problem. But before we get to our final topic, because I got a good final topic for us. Derek, thoughts on just hearing from Bob? And again, I just want to mention anyone that watches. We didn't have the best connection, but I wanted Bob on, and I wanted him to talk about the Patriots. He does such an excellent job. I don't care about how the video looked. It was more important to listen to what he had to say. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, Bob and I followed on Twitter for a while. I actually have both of his books. I feel like they're staples for if you're a big time Patriots fan. I think they make great gifts too.
Yep.
If you already have one, and he's a great ambassador for Patriots fans.
Absolutely,
Patriots
fantastic.
History.
Yep.
It was great to finally kind of chat with him. Yeah,
Yep.
like you said, our unfortunately our video and audio wasn't great, but we'll have him on at some point down the line.
Yep.
And again, and if he he's a great historian for not only the Patriots but the game, and it's great to see him finally get recognized. With his display down at the hall too as well. But I couldn't recommend both of his books enough. I have both copies, and like I said before, if you already have them, they're maybe give them as a gift, and if you don't have them, like you said, they're available on Amazon. I go check it out there.
Yep, excellent. Before we get
he lives in the great city of Woburn, Massachusetts.
Woburn, Mass. Well,
Woburn.
I think I know someone else that's originally from Woburn, Mass. It's kind of I'm not sure if I know. Oh, that's right, it's Mr. Balistreri. Okay, one final thing, because you guys were talking about Albert Breer. even back then, it was 10 years ago, he could not stop talking back then. And I'll just mention that. Anyone that knows Albert Breer,
he hasn't taken a breath since, I don't think.
No, he's the exact same way. And I remember meeting him, and he just wouldn't shut up, and he's still the exact same way. So I just want to mention that.
Maybe say the same thing about me, which is kind of weird.
I wouldn't say that about you, Derek. I'm fond of you, Derek. I'm very fond of you. Okay.
It depends.
Okay.
Depends on the show.
All right. Anyways, final topic, guys. You ready? Here it is. Here's our final topic for today. I keep saying tonight for today. Here we go. Derek, I'll start with you. Will the Patriots go all in when free agency begins? Now, when I mean all in, I'm not talking about going after the biggest free agents. Will they get multiple players similar to, I want to say, even 2001, where they really reshaped their team? Do you think they're going to be very aggressive? Like I said, it might not be the high end. It might be the middle class. What are your thoughts? Do you think that they're going to go all out here to rebuild this roster?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of changes. Going all in is an interesting way. We probably do a show arguing about what that really even means.
I know. I was trying to figure out a way to put it.
No, I understand what you're saying. One thing, going back to the Super Bowl for one last time, there was some talk after the game about, now that Brady won, Belichick has to be aggressive now. And I'm just thinking, if Belichick wasn't motivated enough to be aggressive after the season that just happened and how much work this team needs, then he shouldn't probably even be the coach anymore. If he doesn't realize that this team needs some serious help, then we've got other issues on our hands. But no, I do expect there to be some big wholesale changes. I think some of the veterans will be back. I do think some of the veterans will be moving on. Those decisions, it's going to be a big trickle-down effect. I'm really interested to see throughout the league with when the cap is officially set. The teams that are really over the cap, I think a lot of those middle tier free agents are going to be squeezed out in the market a bit. And I do think that will be Belichick's sweet spot as it normally is. But as we talked about on shows previous, Russ, even leading up to the Super Bowl, this team to me needs to get younger, faster, more athletic. And that's, to me, is the biggest goal for this offseason. I'd love to sit here and say,
but would you marry it with some veterans? And
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. I think you need a happy medium there.
In a perfect world, I think you're signing multiple of the like Lawrence guy types where
that's actually a good example.
You don't want to look like, for example, a good one today. It's February 12th. We're recording the show.
Yep.
3:52 Eastern. JJ Watt was released by the Texans.
How did I know this was going to come up?
Well, no, and I think that JJ Watt, if he was released several years ago, kind of middle of the decade, 2-decade dynasty, and Brady's still here, I think we could all say, yep, pencil JJ in. He's coming here. He wants to be a part of a winning culture. He's made his money. I don't think that as much as great as he is as a player when he's able to be healthy, I just don't think he's a fit for what the Patriots need right now. They don't need a guy who's at the end of the line, I know he's only 30, I think he's only 31, but he's an old 31 in the NFL, okay? Yep. And I just don't think guys like that are really what the Patriots need. They need to, if you're going to talk about some solid veterans in their mid-20s, who are looking to kind of get a change of scenery, I think that makes sense. But to me, I think the Patriots need to get younger, faster, more athletic. I think that starts with the draft. Yep. Obviously, the quarterback situation, which we'll continue to talk about for the next several months until they figure that situation out. But really, even for the draft, for me, Russ, I would say that I said this a couple of weeks ago, and I'm still kind of feeling like this is going to be the case. I think the Patriots on offense will, on the offensive side of the ball, I think free agents, there'll be some guys sprinkled in. And I do think there'll be a veteran quarterback assigned. I don't think it's going to be the guy everybody wants, or the young, flashy draft pick. I do feel like in the draft, they're going to be going after more defensive players. I'm starting to lean more towards either a linebacker or cornerback at 15 from what I think they're going to do. But yeah, I do think in terms of going, all in, I think that there's going to be some big wholesale changes all across the roster. I think there's going to be more turnover this year than there was even last year.
Oh, I'm expecting that, Derek. And I just have to share this because Claire knows why I keep saying tonight. Because just so everyone knows, I actually just did a show before we did this, my Fulham show. And, of course, I'll share this. FYI, Derek, I'm still all in.
All in on Izzo. Good luck.
No. Wrong comment. There's a Goldman. It's tonight here in England, Russ. Yes, I know, and that's probably
Yeah,
why
but
I
true.
had that on my mind.
But to give you an excuse, which I don't often give you, Russ,
You're gonna give me one?
February in Massachusetts, time is a flat circle. It's just dark and
Okay.
cold. It's
Okay.
nighttime all the time. You know, it's like, you see the sun like 3 times in February alone.
Jeez.
Steve's been smiling ear to ear because he's not shoveling 18 inches
Well,
of
I know
snow
why
every
Steve's
other day.
smiling.
Yeah.
I know why Steve's happy. And I know why I'm not so happy. But, Steve, this is going to be interesting because you know how I like to disagree with Derek. I'm actually going to disagree with Derek on this one, and it's going to shock you. Steve, put that down. Put that down right now, please.
85 in Florida. Jeez, that's one.
Okay. He brought up J.J. Watt. Okay. Now, normally, you know me, I would say no way. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to tell you why. No, I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to give you 2 names. Rodney Harrison in his 30s, Junior Seau in his late 30s. Belichick likes veteran players. Now, J.J. Watt has been the guy. He would not be the guy here. He would be an important piece. Would J.J. Watt want to come here? That's
why the
I
answer
don't
is
know.
no. Yeah, and that's
I
why
don't know.
And like I said, Russ, before, if this was, a couple years ago, I think that's the exact kind of guy. I agree with you. That could be a situation like a Junior Seau or whatever, but not for this team right now. To me, it's like a slam dunk. He's either going to Green Bay or Pittsburgh to me, but we'll see.
Play with his brother.
Yeah.
Play with his brother. Okay. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. But just in general terms, Steve, when I use all in, I what I really mean is that they will be aggressive to find the players that they want, to target the players that they want. Not saying high-end players. They might grab one or try to grab 1 or 2. But I think it'll be a middle class all in. That's where I'm going on this, Steve. What are your thoughts?
And absolutely. I mean, they try to do that every year, but a lot of times they.
But I think they really need to do it this year.
Oh yeah, they really need to do it. But they have the cash to do it. But like some of these not the high price guys, but the mid tier offensive free agents, I really think they need to get quarterback at least settled. I'm not saying fixed, but settled down a little bit before any of these guys are going to come. Because no offense to anyone who's a Jarrett Stidham fan, but if I'm one of these high price wide receivers or tight ends, do I want to come play with Jarrett Stidham? Nope. Now, if they get one of these quote unquote bridge quarterback veterans and they end up drafting a young guy, then you're in the ballpark. You can maybe bring in a Jonnu Smith, Curtis Samuel, guys like that. Maybe even a Hunter Henry, although I don't think they're going to get him. Would I like to see Hunter Henry on the Patriots? Sure. Are they going to get him? I don't think so. But stranger things have happened. If they get quarterback settled, a lot of these offensive pieces, they have the money to bring some of these guys in. And like Derek, I really believe that in the draft this year, they're going to go heavy defensively. I really do. But that's not to say, I'm writing off the first round pick as a defensive guy, because a lot's going to depend on how the board plays out. And, if like I noticed one of the guys, Ian Zierlein from The Athletic, he had Justin Fields still on the board at 15 for the Patriots. If a guy like that is there, or a guy like Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle, if one of these guys is hanging around at 15, you'd be hard pressed to pass him up. So
it's really going to come down to me. I think a lot of people will be like, "Oh, well, the team needs X position, so they're going to target X position." I don't think that's not their philosophy. Their philosophy is going to be the best player available, and that's not a bad philosophy. You should always want to acquire the best football players you can.
I agree with that.
You will figure it out later. Now, one of the reasons I do feel like that they are going to target defense first is because I think you could see a run on offensive players and the picks ahead of them. You have the 4 high quarterback prospects. You have 3 highly touted receivers. You have a highly touted tight end, 2 strong tackles. If all those players go between 1 and 14, you're going to get a top 5 defensive player at 15 of the whole class, a top 5 defensive player. Now, to me, that's where it seems to make sense to me. But there's so many pieces that we're missing from this puzzle before this draft comes, I think we can have a good conversation in it in the coming weeks.
Do you think it all begins at quarterback, though, as Steve said? Because, and I've heard this here. I'm talking about in the Boston area, that they need to settle on a quarterback. Like, that's the first thing they need to do, because everything else then can fall into place. But my question to you, both of you guys, is will they?
Well,
will they do that, or will they say, you know what, we're going to go through the draft? Will they make a trade for a quarterback?
I think you still need a bridge quarterback. I mean, because even if they draft one of these, let's just say, for the sake of argument, although
let's say Mac Jones. Let's say Mac Jones.
Mac Jones, or if, like Zerline said in his piece,
Fields.
I really like him. Don't get me wrong. I'm not slamming him at all, but I just don't think Fields will be there at 15. However, let's just, for the sake of argument, say he is there at 15. Do you really want him to start on day one? No. You want an established veteran. Let him learn the system. Let him get comfortable in it. Let him get comfortable with the players that are going to be around him, and then bring him in year two.
Is Damon Hewitt too old? I'm just kidding.
I do.
That's why I've been seeing a lot of talk about guys like Marcus Mariota or even Ryan Fitzpatrick. If it's a 1-year bridge thing, I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah, okay. If it's a one,
if you're bringing him in to be the guy, and then you don't draft a quarterback.
See, that's what I don't want. Guys,
if you're bringing him in and then drafting a quarterback in the 6th or 7th round, no, I'm not on board with that.
I want, as Derek and I have talked about, we want the rebuild. So I'll throw this out. I'll throw this name out. We all are very familiar with this name, because this is an interesting topic. And again, who knows if this would ever happen? Garoppolo. Okay, we'll just throw it out there. We know how he is, how injury prone the guy is. But say they went for him. I'm still drafting a quarterback, guys. I'm still drafting a quarterback as your future, because I don't think Garoppolo, even healthy, should be your long-term solution. They need a long-term solution. Derek, they need to do it through the draft, okay?
Yeah,
I'm all in on getting a quarterback in the draft. They need, as Steve said, a bridge guy's fine. Maybe even Garoppolo's a bridge guy for a couple seasons.
Be a bridge guy.
He'd definitely be a bridge guy. To me, you bring in a veteran quarterback for probably 2 years as you build up the team around him. And if you do draft a young guy, you're letting him sit, learn the system, and then all of a sudden the team is ready around him, and he's there, and he can, and then you kind of go from there. But to me, a guy we've had on the show before, Fred Kirsch, brought up a really good point on Patriots Unfiltered this week when I was listening to their show. And he thought, he kind of laid out there, like, what if Belichick will try to take a guy in the second round or in the middle rounds because he's had success with someone like a Jimmy Garoppolo, and does that influence his decision at all? Does he think he can do that again? And I just thought it was an interesting point. And again, these are one of those conversations that we have all the time where we don't really know the answer to. It's all hypothetical. But in my mind, I just don't see the Patriots, even though I'd love to see them target a quarterback and trade up a couple of spots to get him, anywhere between the 6 and 12 range, and they say, you know what, let's go up and get this guy. I'd love to see that, because it would make me excited, because obviously they want this guy. They've identified it, and they've identified a piece that they think can be their future. But I just don't think it's going to play out that way. I do think it's going to be really establishing a quarterback early, which, Russ, to your original question, I think is extremely important, because last year you were behind the 8 ball in that aspect, and it kind of slowed you down a little bit, along with other things, of course. And I think that you want to establish that part early so that you can avoid a situation like Steve's laying out, where if you don't have a quarterback, even if you throw a ton of money at some of these high-priced, wide receivers or tight ends, if you're not blowing another team out of the ballpark with their offer, they're going to pick a team that they feel like is a competent, has a competent quarterback in place and has a chance to win. So that will hurt them if they can't settle that earlier than later.
Okay. Good stuff, guys. Good stuff. Great way to end the show talking about this, because we have a lot to talk about as we get closer to free agency. And I look forward to it. Before we go, I just want to thank our very special guest, Bob Hilberg, for joining us. Please feel free to contact him if you would like to read one of his books. As Derek says, he has both of his books. They're excellent. Please do get one of his books. I also want to mention that please do watch us on the Pats Fans Facebook page, but also on the YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the Pats Fans YouTube channel. We're going to really try to push this again. So please do subscribe to it. It's a great way to watch us. Because
Ian will be happy.
Right. Ian will be happy, and it'll be another way that we can get Ian on the 10th anniversary show. And, of course, everyone wants to see the Rob Ninkovich lookalike, which is Derek. Okay. All right. Well, it's time to wrap up the show.
I'm just uglier and
all I'm going to say is I've never seen Ninkovich and Derek in the same place.
I have not. We actually.
I have, but
okay. He was
That
actually
doesn't count.
Derek was actually looking very Rob Ninkovich when the three of us went to the premiere of 3 Games to Glory when they beat the Seahawks, and I'm like, boy, Derek could have been a ringer at that point.
Yeah, I was about 6 inches shorter and about 30 pounds lighter back then. So
okay, I'm trying to give you a little credit, Derek. I'm trying here.
See there, I was going to say, one of the players came up and asked Nink if he could borrow his program, but
that was it. Yeah,
that was it. Okay, well, that's going to do it for this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. For Derek Havens and Steve Balistrieri, I'm Russ Coleman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast of PatsFans.com.